This is Nick Ricada, and you're listening to a Sunset Sea production. It's better than whiskey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 35 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I'm Holden, and I'm here with my co-host Simone, and today we're going to be talking about episode 12 of 14 of Berlin Alexanderplatz. This episode in particular is titled The Serpent in the Soul of the Serpent. And as always, we'd like to start out these discussions with a brief play-by-play, a summary of what took place in the particular episode or film or whatever piece of media that it is that we're reviewing and analyzing at a particular time. So, what happened in this episode? Franz and Mitzi have reconciled after their big fight in the previous episode. So, in the last episode, Franz pretty much almost beat Mitzi to death after, another one of his violent outbursts kind of led to some problems there. But, Franz's apartment has now returned to a state of delicate domestic tranquility, which is always nice. And the two flirt and play around with one another as Mitzi cleans up. And she asks Franz to take her to Max's bar, where he goes every day with the rest of the criminal syndicate, the rest of Pum's gang. He is reluctant to do this, but agrees, and so actually does take her there one night. And from there, he introduces her to Max, Mech, and Reinhold. This time properly, although Reinhold and Mitzi have met before. They met when he was hiding in Franz's bed on the night of the big fight between Franz and Mitzi in the previous episode. And he was the one who diffused the situation and very well saved Mitzi's life. But Mitzi, however, does not trust him. She does trust Mech, however, even though it seems as if Franz and Mech's friendship is on the ice. Franz appears to struggle with his feelings towards Mech. Although the narrative does not provide a clear answer one way or the other as to why this is the case, it can be assumed that Franz blames Mech in part for maybe not defending or saving him after he was pushed out of the car by Reinhold on the night of the heist he was essentially forced into being a part of. Franz may see Mech as complicit in the event that led to the loss of his arm, despite being one of his oldest and closest friends. And perhaps from Franz's view of things, Mech chose Pum's and his job in the criminal syndicate over that long-term friendship. And in objective reality, I mean, considering what the show does present with the evidence that we have to work with, that is sourced from the show in particular, it seems that this is essentially true. This is essentially the case. And Mech may feel guilt about his choices, but of course he was the one who made them nevertheless. And he continues that streak of idle complicity in this episode when Reinhold blackmails him into setting up a meeting between himself and Mitzi. And Reinhold does this by threatening to tell Pums about a mink coat that Mech stole from the syndicate's supply. So no truly good characters here, no purely good characters among any of the members of the cast. So from here, Mech does set up the appointment by pretending to want to tell Mitzi all about Franz's past, and so he uses Mitzi's curiosity about Franz and who he is and what he was like, I guess, growing up and that sort of thing. And Mitzi agrees to join him from there and lies to Franz about it, telling him that she has to meet up with her client again and stay in a hotel room while he attends a business conference in another part of the country. Franz is not happy about this, but his reaction this time is much less extreme than it was last time. Instead of crying and yelling and, acting like it's the end of the world, and now he's matured to the point where he only passive-aggressively taunts Mitzi with some sing-song and rhymes in his typical idiosyncratic way. And Mitzi chides him, but the two separate on relatively amicable terms, so things are still pretty good between them. From there, Mech drives Mitzi out to the forest, and as they're driving, he tells her stories about his years with Franz, which we don't get to hear, so that's all off camera, all off screen. And they arrive at the same outdoor cafe that she and Franz have visited on numerous occasions now. The female owner recognizes her to the extent of being able to remember her order from memory from the last time she was a patron there, from the other episode in which she and Mitzi and Franz went to the woods and had their, I guess, idle little, what is it, like bucolic, made some bucolic little memories there during those happier times, I suppose. And so, Mitzi is irritated to discover that Mech was lying and that the whole thing was a setup. It was a ruse to get Reinhold into contact with her. And the three sit down to a tense but brief conversation at their table. Mitzi and Reinhold put on civil, polite personas and airs in front of Mech and the rest of the cafe's patrons. But as soon as Mech leaves to take a phone call, it becomes clear that neither party trusts the other. both have their own agendas, and what will follow from this point forward is a sort of morbid dancing between those two agendas. It's Ryan. We don't really know what Reinhold wants yet, but we do know that Mitzi wants to know more about Franz. She wants to get this like inside information as to what happened to him and everything, and like what how he lost his arm and like where he comes from basically. And yeah, so that's what she's in it for. Reinhold seems to be in it for some just his typical kind of snaky, malicious motivations, but we'll expound upon that a little further. So from there, Reinhold takes Mitzi out into the woods, and from there, the remainder of the episode consists of a sort of melodramatic, operatic, I would say, exchange between the two characters. Reinhold is trying to seduce Mitzi in the hopes that he will. So this is his motivation. Reinhold is trying to seduce Mitzi in the hopes that he will be able to take her away from Franz, and therefore cut him down a little, make him miserable. Because they have this really bitter rivalry that's really one-sided. I mean, Franz doesn't really harbor any ill will towards Reinhold, even though he should. And Reinhold continually tries to undercut this guy for whatever reason. It's a weird little thing they got going on. But this is another aspect of it. This is another step in that particular process of theirs. And so yeah, so that's what Reinhold's doing. Whereas Mitzi is playing up her feminine charms and playing the role of the prostitute in the hopes that it will gain her some new insight into Franz and his past, who the man really is, and the two go back and forth without making much progress either way, and it is demonstrated through this that both are capable manipulators and that they are, two strong heads butting against one another. From there, Reinhold shows Mitzi two strange tattoos that he has, one on his wrist and the other on his chest. They're both of an anvil, they're the same thing, and he explains that it's his quote-unquote coat of arms, but he doesn't expand on that. He's very vague about it, so that's all we really know. It could mean that he was involved with a gang at some point that wasn't Pums' gang. Maybe he's part of a some sort of mafia, German mafia or something weird like that. But I guess we'll never know. And then from there, he tries several times to engage in intercourse with Mitzi. He tries to seduce her, but Mitzi cuts him off each time. And this quasi-theatrical dance between the two ultimately ends with Reinhold telling Mitzi the story of how he made Franz lose his arm. And Mitzi, in her distress, cries out "murderer" into the forest, and this freaks Reinhold out. And so, in his panic and in his general violence and rage and all that, he pins Mitzi to the forest floor and chokes her out, presumably to death, before taking off. And from there, the credits play, and that's the end of the episode. Did I miss anything, Simone? Is there anything you'd like to add to my little summary before we move on to the main discussion portion of the podcast here?
None.
Okay, cool. Well, so then if that's the case, so Simone, let me ask you, what would you rate this episode out of 10 and why?
I don't know. I think I need to rate the whole episode in two aspects. Maybe in the aesthetic one and the storyline part of it. Because I think that I like the two parts differently in different ways, or I interpret it in different ways. Because some aspects are appealing, but some are not too. So like I said, I like the aesthetic of this one. Makes the whole thing makes it a good episode, a successful episode, because it's how each character portray it. I didn't like it. It's gonna lead me to. I hope it put me in the situation where I'm hoping that the covering up this whole series will end soon, I guess. But anyway, I will rate it maybe a 7 because of the aesthetic aspect, but for the storyline, the story part, maybe a 6 because I don't like kind of heavy drama. I guess it's just too much for this episode. I don't know.
Yeah. For me, I'd give it a 5. And I think I know what you're talking about, because I think I figured out what the fundamental problem with these later episodes in the series is. I think what it comes down to is that each of these episodes, they really only contain about 10 to 15 minutes of actual proper narrative substance. You know what I mean? Even though each episode is an hour long, I would say only about a 6 of each of them actually counts for anything. The rest is just like, it's fluff. It's padding to increase the runtime. But it's a very specific kind of padding. It isn't easy to define. The best way to describe it would be to say that it's as if the show has become a sort of I would say starkly lit play. The cast is much more concrete than it was in the, or I should say static than it was in the first half of the series. And each character has now been limited to being defined largely by their interactions and relationships with all the other characters. The cast and narrative scope of the series has also become practically microscopic at this point. I would say. And the main emphasis of the series as a whole has shifted from what will happen to Franz in the long term and his character development, his introspection, what his interior states versus his exterior behaviors. All of that is sort of it's fallen by the wayside in favor of I guess just seeing the performances that the characters will give when interacting with one another. And I think in that sense, the series becomes a glorified play that suffers beneath an increasingly whiny, melodramatic tone and structure. Mitzi, for example, has a tendency of screaming hysterically out of nowhere, and especially when the moment does not call for her to. Reinhold slithers around with his Machiavellian ways, but is not convincing in his seductive capabilities. Franz complains and is as petulant as a child when it really doesn't make sense for him to be. And Mech compromises the values and things he held closest to him in the first half of the series for virtually nothing in the second half. There is a marked lack of consistency and continuity between the first and second halves of the series overall. And at this point, we might as well be watching something else entirely. But yeah, I would say the problem with this episode is the same as the problem that the last 4 or 5 episodes suffered under, and it's that the series is warped into something that it shouldn't be. It's a lazily written distortion of itself, a sort of metaphorical character drama play or theatrical performance with a tone and structure that make it feel more like a court drama or a comedy of manners from like feudal Japan or something more so than anything else. It's bizarre, but I'm assuming that the reason why the series has become this way is simply because the people working on it stopped caring about halfway through. Having 14-hour-long episodes and a 13-hour-long episodes and a 2-hour-long finale may have been too ambitious and, more importantly, unnecessary for the source material from which the series was inspired. When it comes down to it, there just isn't any reason to give a full 60 minutes to something that could be conveyed in 15 to 20. And when you drag things out that way for half your series, you end up with an unrecognizable farce. And that's how Berlin Alexanderplatz has been since, I would argue, episode 4. For me, episode 4 was really the last episode in the entire series that was unquestionably good. I never doubted its narrative strength or artistic potentiality. I never questioned the quality. Episodes 5 through 7 were all right. Not quite as bad as episodes 8 through 11, but yeah, the whole thing has been on the decline for a while now. And it's getting to the point where the flaws and weaknesses distract from the work's narrative and inner world. And if that isn't the mark of artistic failure, then I honestly don't know what is. So for me, this episode was a veritable failure in my book. And in my opinion, it has earned the F I've given it. So I would give it a 5 out of 10, a 50%. And that's generous because it's not as if like half of the episode was great and the other half was bad. It was pretty bad all throughout, I would say. But yeah, is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, I think in the middle of the episode, it's this middle or the beginning. When the decline started, it's still bearable. But now, I don't think so. I think that I'm still the show is still unpredictable, or I cannot say any predictions at all because it really goes the other way around, or in a way that nobody expected it to be. So I don't know what would happen in the previous or in the last 2 episodes of this one, especially the 2-hour long one.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I want to circle back to something that you said before about how you had to you've taken this episode as 2 separate kind of 2 separate components, the aesthetic and the narrative. So clearly, I mean, we've both established that the narrative isn't very good, but before we, I want to focus a little more on the aesthetic. So when you say aesthetic, are you referring to the I guess the show's technical aspects? Is that the music and the sets and the camera work and the acting, are you referring to aesthetics in the sense of style? So stylistic choices, the narrations, the intertitles, which are the text, the pieces of the white screens of text with little poems or whatever written on them. What exactly do you mean by aesthetic? How would you define the episode's aesthetic elements personally? Just so we can get a better understanding of what we're working with here.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good question to begin with. What am I talking about with regard to aesthetic? I guess if I were to define what is success aesthetic is in this particular episode, or what particular aspect of the aesthetic that I like for this episode, is especially the scene, the exact scene where the characters are moving. Um, at some point I feel like that they are connected into it, but the way that things are overly dramatic, it gives me to set aside how the character acts in this particular scene, because the scene is really good. I like how the scene itself can stand on, the drama that it has or it possesses just enough for me. But the way that the character did their acting quite so much, it's kind of they. It seems like that they are acting in a different dimension, which opposite to what am I enjoying or what am I seeing on the each particular scene, especially the one on the forest.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot like Tosca. It's very operatic. It's a very melodramatic, exaggerated, blown out of proportion tone that they decided to go with, and it doesn't really make sense because within the context of the series, it just defies the inner logic, the logic that they've been following up until now. It's like every episode has always been, even if things are exaggerated because obviously it's a work of fiction. It's like they still, interactions between characters and like the tone and the there's a sense of realism in the series that it's in contrast to all the experimental stuff, especially like all the random intersplicings of let's say, animals being slaughtered and that sort of thing. Beyond that, there's a normal world that contrasts with all of it. We established in the previous 11 episodes that Franz is he's an eccentric in this world. The world is not. It's not this. This isn't the whole world. It's just the world according to Franz Bieberkopf. And so there is a regular, stable, sane world that would resemble very closely our own, if it is not our own. But here, for the first time, we kind of see this shift where it's like they're unintentionally doing something kind of weird and unconventional, or maybe not unconventional, but it's a lot like Posca. It really is. They've sacrificed that realism. They've exchanged realism for, I guess, dramatic tension, dramatic emphasis. But the problem is that scene in the forest, they would have had enough drama already if they just stuck with the realistic tone, continued in the logic that the series had already established over the course of 11 episodes. That's a lot of time to set things up and get the precedent and get your viewers used to a particular way of doing things. So it is really bizarre that they decided to go for this this completely. It's a complete shift, and it just has nothing to do with it. It's almost as if the scene is a completely different thing. It's almost as if it's like a dress rehearsal or something. Something that wasn't meant to belong in the final cut, but it's here. And it just doesn't really fit in. And it doesn't really it doesn't fit in, and it's not it's not a case of juxtaposition. It's not the weird narrations over a flashback of Franz murdering his wife Ida. There's no intentionality there. There's nothing that it doesn't say anything. You don't get anything out of including it there. It does worse. It takes away. And so yeah, I definitely I see where you're coming from there. Yeah, for sure, and I would agree. Anything you'd like to add, Simone?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in each episode, we always talk about the juxtaposition, or how does this different elements or different styles that they combine together, which usually didn't go well, happen. This juxtaposition thing, but in just like you mentioned, how we can notice how this particular style of them that they are using on each artistic so you call experiments that they include in each episode are declining in the previous ones, and I'm expecting a lot worse into the coming episodes if they won't be able to balance things out.
Yeah. Yeah. Only time will tell. But hopefully they pull it together just for the end. Maybe that happens a lot. People they get their shit together for the end. That's what happened with Mad Men. But anyway, so Simone, what did you think of this episode from a technical point of view? We've talked about the aesthetics, we talked about the narrative, but what about the technical stuff? And so again, for everyone listening, when I refer to a film or a show's technical aspects or technical perspective, point of view, whatever the term may be, it's referring to like the camera work, the sets, the music, the acting that could be included as well. So Simone, what did you think of the episode from a technical point of view?
Aspect, just like I mentioned, I like the whole scene because it can stand on its own. It possesses right at the right um number or the enough element for drama, which makes the whole thing. Or if you're going to look at each aspect, its technicality, you will to see what it really means or what is it really all about in connection to the story itself and the episode. But it's just if they are just always trying to some bits of experiment that sometimes I understand the inspiration of doing it so because it work at some aspect, but they should learn that or they should get it that it might happen sometimes, and in this episode that what really happened. But I like the technical aspects of it. I like that. That saves up the whole thing. If the technical aspect doesn't work that well, um, I might give it also a 5 or lower.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think they are. They do tend to be over reliant on like they got like this bag of tricks that they kind of they cycle through and they pick from it a bit too much, pick too often. It would be better if they had other things to do or they just had talent, maybe instead of having to rely on that constantly. But I won't bash them too hard. But it's still I would agree it wasn't. I would say for the most part, the production quality, the production value of the series as a whole has dropped to the point in the second half of the series, second half of the episodes, where it's more like watching a local play than it is a nationally like a syndicated television series like it is, or like a theatrically released fucking 15-hour long movie. It's like it just doesn't seem like it's in that caliber of media because it's just so it just looks so shitty. Optics are a very important thing. Visuals are a very important thing. It's not easy to make TV or cinema film. It's not easy to make it convincing. You got to put a lot into it. A lot of the time. I mean, if you're being realistic, it can actually be worse for you. You have to create an illusion. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it comes down to is creating illusions. And I don't think they did the work. Didn't put the work in for this episode as they've done for previous ones. Now I can only assume that at this point their budget was beginning to run low, and I think that makes sense given the time and place in which the series was made. Again, communist Germany. I'm pretty sure, right? No, it was West Germany, but still, I mean, a lot of shit going on, and this is one of those like high art kind of projects. It's not a blockbuster. It's not gonna bring the return and all that. It's not great. So it makes sense. Things like this are a luxury, so it makes sense that it would kind of be the way it is. But yeah, I think the things that stuck out to me the most this episode were Reinhold's tattoos and a few of the shots during the bar scene. The perspective on the shot where Franz and Mitzi are sitting at their table in particular was showcasing the whole of the bar from the perspective of where the jukebox is, taking in Max at the bar and all the various patrons and all the various tables spread throughout the rest of the room. I thought that shot was very flat and it exposed the fact, at least to me, that what we as the audience are supposed to see as a bar is actually just little more than a cheap set. I think it gave away the fact that it's a set. Because no actual bar or room of any sort, for that matter, looks the way that the bar did in those few shots. And but all it takes is a bad shot or two to tear down the illusion, which is why again film and television are such difficult mediums to work within. Also, Reinald's tattoos, to me, they looked as though they were drawn on with a Sharpie or something, as if no effort went into to making them look realistic. It would honestly have been better off if they hadn't even included that at all. There's just no point. Like it's like if you're not going to do it right, then why do it at all? It's going to hurt it's going to hurt the episode more so than anything. If you're going to do it poorly. So yeah, for me, the technical stuff was worse in this episode than I think it has been in the whole of the series ever. But I will qualify that statement by acknowledging the fact that the technical scope of this episode is much smaller than it has been in other episodes. So what it comes down to, I think, is ratios pretty much. What little they did here, they did poorly, and the problems the episode did have would not have stuck out as sorely if there was more going on. But the fact of the matter is that there wasn't, and so because of that, it affects the overall quality of the episode even more harshly. Anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, but so there are some like, or there are always, I guess, that aside from the act of each character, the scene also top or part of it is a part of a whole, and some if you're going to connect all these things that are favorable, this is not really a good episode to begin with.
Nah, not at all. But yeah, so to move into some of the narrative, particular questions about the narrative and stuff. Simone, why do you think why has Franz fallen out with Mech? What's going on there? What's their relationship doing at the moment?
Um, uh, if I'm going to look back to the episode after what happened to Fran's arms, I would say that Franz might probably and also Meg, between them, they might realize some other things that they might not agree with just before this, or they might probably realize that it's no longer tolerable. At some point, um, these things that are happening, they find it connected to what the problem is from before. Because to compare it with Fran's relationship with Reinhold, Reinhold is not really his friend, or maybe he's just playing along with him. But Meg, there's a connection, a real connection of their friendship, and that probably um, is just more personal to Franz compared to what his relationship with Reinhold is.
Yeah, because they go way back and all that. They have that personal connection established, and yeah, part of it might be that they are incompatible, and obviously the whole business with the automobile accident and the heist and everything probably threw a whole wrench in it. I don't know. My perspective is that for me, Mech began the series by essentially putting his life on the line for Franz whenever Franz needed it, and sometimes even when he didn't need it. Especially at the very beginning with Luders, who was Lena's uncle or whatever, the relative who tried to screw Franz over by sleeping with the widow and just doing a bunch of other heinous, stuff, just being a scumbag, being Reinhold before Reinhold, so to speak. And Mech was willing to kill that guy and willing to throw everything away just to get back at him for fucking over Franz, right? But yeah, Mech was introduced to us as the old faithful friend whose loyalty to Franz was concrete and solid enough to always be a given. Never a shadow of a doubt as to whose side he was on, as to whether or not he was going to back Franz when he needed it, and even when he didn't need it. But now, however, since episode 6, that dynamic has changed. But the transition has been executed very poorly by the scriptwriters, in my opinion. Going from being this solid best friend to kind of on the outs with Franz. As viewers, I think we've missed the bridge between Mech being Franz's closest ally to Franz no longer wanting to speak to him. And the most we were given was the brief conversation they had in the subway terminal, in which Franz cryptically asked Mech if he ever had a father. And since then, there really has been no development in their relationship whatsoever. So where it is now can only be inferred. And it's pretty much literally anybody's guess at this point because the narrative isn't really giving us much. And that's irritating, especially when one considers how easy it would be to explain it. It would only take a few lines of dialogue. That's the minimum. That's all you really need. And those lines, those lines are given here between Franz and Mech, in which we are shown that Franz still likes Mech when he's when Franz and Mitzi, when they're sitting at the table in the bar and they're talking about Mech when he's not there. We are shown through that dialogue that Franz still likes Mech, he still respects him and cares about him, but blames him for his part in the loss of his arm, and so cannot directly associate with him the way that he used to. But this development that they show, for me, it's too little too late almost at that point. It should have been explained before, at least 2 episodes prior, when it was still fresh, when it was still relevant to what was going on. But now, now that it's here, it lands with all the impact of a dead fish, at least for me. But yeah, I think they've fallen out because Franz blames Mech for not doing more when Reinhold pushed him out of the speeding car. Franz can forgive Reinhold, I think, because Reinhold was more honest about his intentions than Mech. But Mech was supposed to be the virtuous one of the group. He was supposed to be like the decent criminal, the criminal with a heart of gold, that sort of thing. And Reinhold is an obvious snake. He's a clear evil. The bad that Mech has done is harder to explain. It's harder to support because hypocrisy has always been, hypocrisy is always worse than outright malevolence because the hypocrite is capable of resistance. The hypocrite is capable of more, and yet actively chooses to do the wrong thing, knowing full well what it is they're doing. Anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, exactly. I like your point that it's that all get out of what happened to Meg's relationship and Francis, the argument that they have on the subway station. I mean, that is also too much of a drama. It's just the drama that took place in that particular scene is quite intense as how these episodes are going. Just like you said, that it's just a bit of a conversation or some lines would be enough to explain the whole thing. But it took a couple more episodes before they wrap up the whole thing, and just like you said, that it's not even relevant at all.
Yeah.
To this episode.
Yeah, I mean, we've already moved on to other plots and stuff. Like there's other shit going on now. There's a new set of conflicts to worry about. It's like, why? It's just could have done it sooner. Literally would have taken care of the problem altogether. It's the fact that I think it's the fact that it's such an easy thing to solve that makes it so frustrating. It just doesn't make any sense. Like it's a really lame oversight on the scriptwriter's part. But yeah, I don't know. So moving from there, Simone, do you think their relationship can recover from the frigid bipolar state that it's in now, or things between them over entirely for the rest of the series, for the remaining 2 episodes?
Yeah, it might change, but I don't think that it will change because what happened at the end of this episode, something terrible happened to Mitze, which Franz admired, and if Franz will know that Mech has some connection to what happened to Mitze, it might enrage him. And also, if this whole thing didn't happen at all, I don't think that there's a small probability that they might be okay, because it seems like that they are both not giving way to, or they are too into their do you call this to their argument or what they are holding into, that my friend betray me at some point narrative and stuff.
Yeah, they're both kind of forgiving that way, I guess. I don't know. The thing about it is that they know the score. They operate under the same wavelength. I mean, they're both in their own ways. They're both societal outcasts, and so they don't have really anyone else but each other. And so maybe out of that desperation and just kind of the I guess the law of the streets, so to speak, the law of the I guess the underbelly of the society in which they're a part of. It might be the case that they end up just kind of brushing it, brushing it aside when the time comes. But yeah, I think my guess would be that it will have to. Their relationship will have to recover. And I'm assuming, by the way, I'm assuming that Mitzi is dead. And I'm pretty sure she's dead. But I just there might be a little bit of ambiguity because of how surreal that scene was. But I'm pretty sure they are trying to convey that she is no longer living, right? And so I think her death will likely force Franz into a more ruthless state of being, and this ruthlessness will perhaps conflict with the operations that Pums and his syndicate are doing. This is just my random spitball guess, right? And somewhere in the midst of that conflict will be Mech, and that will be Mech as the middleman, kind of halfway between being with Pums and halfway between being with Franz. He could go either way. He's kind of the neutralist, the most neutral party in the entire scheme of things. But I think in that conflict will be Mech, and that will be where Franz and Mech are forced to either reconcile their differences and work towards a common goal, whatever that common goal may be, or obliterate the remaining vestiges of their friendship in order to satisfy their conflicting agendas. Any number of things could happen to see the series out, obviously. Franz could embrace his criminal role wholeheartedly now that Mitzi is out of the picture, or he could attempt to run away. He could come into a direct conflict with Reinhold, and the two could be attempting to kill one another, or just one or the other. Maybe it's only Reinhold trying to kill Franz, or it's only Franz trying to kill Reinhold, that sort of thing. Lots of different possibilities, but one of the likeliest, at least from my perspective, is that Franz and Mech will be forced to acknowledge the tension in their friendship at least once before the series is out. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, it could go both ways. Maybe they will be get back to how things works, and maybe it might give more what do you call that in English? Few more cracks on their friendship.
Yeah, more pressure, more kind of what was it? Furthering that divide, that gap. But Simone, why does Reinhold want to sleep with Mitzi? What are his motives here? I think this is a very interesting question because it's a bit ambiguous. It's a bit muddy, so I kind of want to get into it. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think this is rooted to how the relationship between Reinhold and Franz started. It started with this whole crappy or quite messy thing with them that Reinhold is always giving or throwing his women's or girls to Franz, and that's it. That in my perspective, Reinhold seems to be in the hierarchy where Franz is kind of lower than him, so that's how it goes. That he's giving his girls to Franz after he did some sort of things with them. And now that he sees Franz after what happened, he lost his arm. So maybe in his point of view that Franz is lower than him, and seeing him being able to get girls better than the ones that he usually had, it enraged him. It's the normal thing of envy. Just like you said, I'm able to see your argument regarding how Reinhold is more human, or his nature is more human compared to Franz, because Franz is usually the things that Franz designs are not common, or it's really out of the line of thinking of a human being. So I think you get it now.
Yeah, because Franz is a lot like a child. He has very childlike qualities, whereas Reinhold is he's clearly an adult, and he has those very, I guess, adult forms of jealousy, and it's And yeah, I like what you said there. It's true. It's like they are sort of in this competition, and there is this sort of like hierarchy that they're both trying to, in their own ways. I mean, I think Franz isn't really aware of it, but Reinhold very much is, and that's I think the big difference between, a child and an adult. If we're going to talk about like a childish state of mind and an adult state of mind, it's like when you are an adult, you're much more kind of concerned with status and that sort of thing. You're much more insecure than you are when you're a child because ignorance is bliss, as they say. You're much more insular as a kid. We all are. We're all sort of more closely connected to our inner worlds and our interior states as opposed to what's going on outside. Maybe something. There's something there, but I think personally, for me, it's like again, I think the script writers here, I think they're really trying to bank a little too hard on the fact that Reinhold is a character who is consumed and driven by a sort of incomprehensible darkness within him. In this, he's a physical manifestation. I would say he's a physical manifestation of the complexities of human nature. He represents the underbelly. Yeah, it represents the underbelly of human behavior. Why do people kill? Why do people cheat? Why do people rape? Reinhold's motivations, Reinhold's motives have oftentimes been intentionally confusing. His presence within the series, I think, it raises a bunch of questions that are likely to never be answered. As these fundamental questions about the dark side of human nature have yet to be answered in reality. Or at least in a way that everyone can agree upon. There's no universally accepted answer as to why people. I guess just in a broad sense, why people are the way they are. It's like if we wouldn't have to constantly ask these big questions for generation after generation if we had already figured it out. If there was some objective scientific answer to it. I mean, we would just point to that. It's like the Earth. The Earth spins around the sun. It's like it orbits. It's that's an objective truth that's scientific, that's rooted in something concrete, empirical, something that we can look at, point to, and just say that is the way it is. There's no other way that it is. End of story. End of discussion. Can't really do that with a lot of this like psychological and I guess emotional stuff. That wisdom. It's a different kind, and it's probably because we're just too close to it. Maybe only like an alien, an outsider to the human race would be able to look at us objectively, obviously, because we can't. We're too close to our own brains. It's why we probably can't understand our brains. It's like we're just not to that point yet where we can fully comprehend the thing that we understand everything with. It's hard to do that. It's complicated, but yeah. And so because there is no objective truth, answer to any of these questions that the character of Reinhold raises, we're only left with interpretations. And it really is, it's up to the individual thinker to draw their own conclusions. And that's the case with Reinhold, as it is the case with these broad questions regarding human nature and like why we are the way we are. The individual viewers, I guess they decide what Reinhold is essentially. But what I'd argue is that now in episode 12, the writers are just pretty much fucking around and don't give a shit, and they're lazily rushing to connect the dots of the source material. It's not about how you get there; it's about just getting there for them now. And they're taking all these shortcuts and that sort of thing. For them, there needs to be more drama. Something needs to happen to Franz in order to bring him out of the tentative, happy, and docile state he's in now with Mitzi. So let's just have Reinhold choke her to death in the forest. Let's have it's like Reinhold arbitrarily take an interest in her all of a sudden, completely out of nowhere. Just have him, suddenly become obsessed with her and then proceed to choke her to death in the forest. As long as it advances the narrative, that's all that matters. Well, in my opinion, it's bullshit and it doesn't make any sense. What the writers have done here is banked on what was already established in previous episodes without establishing anything new for this episode. It's a lot like a chef who follows a recipe for the first 5 steps before giving up and improvising on the last 3. Because Reinhold has been established as a compulsive womanizer, and because it's been established that he's actively hostile towards Franz, the writers feel they can do pretty much whatever they want within that framework. But the problem is that when it comes to television, and movie scripts, you really do have to be thorough with what's going on. You can either explain things explicitly, directly, or allude to them through indirect dialogue and imagery and that sort of thing. But you can't just assume that the audience is going to go with whatever you want to do. You have to justify it to them by establishing a sort of inner logic within the script. And here it's like there's a step or two of that logic missing. It's like starting a math equation but giving up halfway and scribbling out an estimate as your final answer. It just doesn't work that way. You're probably not going to be right. You're likely to mess something up, and in here I think they did. the motivation is vague, and it's pretty much just that Reinhold still hates Franz for backing out of their little, I guess, pseudo-sexual agreement. Well, no, it wasn't pseudo. It was little sexual agreement all those episodes back with all the women and everything. And that's pretty much all there is to it. But it should be so much more complex, I think. There should be elements of Reinhold's guilt incorporated into the, guilt with regard to what he did to Franz. That should be incorporated into the actions he takes at this point. But all of that has gone unrecognized and unacknowledged, and there's no reason for it to. It's right there. It's ripe for the picking, and yet the writers seem to have just passed it by altogether for one reason or another. Maybe it's more fleshed out in a novel, and maybe just because it's a film, it's a different it's a television series, it's a different medium. They had to cut some things out or whatever, or shorten some things, but it's not good. It's not a good. It's not. It wasn't. They didn't do it right. And yeah, and the Reinhold that has been set up in this episode, he's like a base impression. He's like a very basic impression of the Reinhold that's been set up in the series overall. It's like the difference between Spider-Man in a movie and Spider-Man is a shitty toy made in some random factory in China or something. There's little to meaningfully connect the two beyond the superficial. Not to bash China or anything, but just giving a random example. I don't know. Anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
I like the last example too. Yeah. This is. I don't know. It's just I can see the connection. I think that how the whole show is going is it's in the different form. Of course, it's in the different form because it's in the form media. To compare it to the source material, I guess source material work in a different way because it's in a book form. So there are different laws that make things work. And in this one, if they are going to apply those laws in this form, it might not work. So now they are resorting to creating their own set of values and laws, which in this episode just really goes that well.
No, I wouldn't say so. I would not say so. Yeah. Oh, here's a weird one, Simone. Do you think the woman, so the lady who owns the outdoor cafe in the countryside, do you think she'll ever play a more major role in the narrative within the last two episodes of the series? And if so, what do you think that role will be? And why, I guess?
The first time that she was introduced in the last episode, I thought that she might be connected to Fran's first wife, or I forgot her name.
Oh, Ida.
Yeah, that's probably the only connection that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And in this one, that she is, that she will be has an important role in this one because probably she might be the whistleblower to the police of what the whole thing happened to Mitzi.
Oh yeah, because she is a witness. She could be very helpful in that sense. She might be like maybe the nail in the coffin that gets Reinhold arrested if there's some confusion as to whether he's actually guilty or not. Like maybe she could be the thing that does it. Maybe come in at the very end, kind of be like a little twist surprise, like, oh, you forgot about her, but here she is. She was actually one of the most important characters, or something like that. But it's been established in previous episodes that she recognizes Franz from somewhere. So I would say yes. And my guess would be that Franz will have to come to her to find out what happened to Mitzi. And if not that, he'll have to come to her eventually for some other reason. And they'll both be put in a situation in which they're forced to interact and maybe even confront the past that they share together. She may prove to be his, she might prove to be his final savior, his last guardian angel after Ava and all the others have gone or abandoned him, or he's separated from them, or whatever the case may be. Maybe not. In any event, I would say that her presence in this episode was the most interesting thing about it. So I'm curious to see where her character goes in the last two episodes, if anywhere at all. And the one thing I'm almost definite about is that she'll show up at least one more time. I don't think they would provide her with as much narrative attention as they did without doing anything about it, But then again, considering the shambles that this episode and really the last 4 or 5 episodes have been, I wouldn't put anything past them at this point. The writers could just they could just throw all logic out the window and say fuck it. We're just dicking around at this point, just trying to get to the end of the script. Kind of like what we're doing now, but I feel like we're doing a better job than they are. Maybe I don't know. Anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, that's I hope that I'm really hoping that the only point of her character, for her to be introduced into the last episode, is to create or uncover a bridge from what happened to the past. Because I guess that um, I think the juxtaposition that they do when they are showing what happened, the death of Fran's first wife, that horrible scene. Still that there are still a lot of things that are not fully established or not exactly or fully explained
Yeah.
in that particular scene. That there might be much more into it, and this woman in the cafe would be the key to uncover it.
The key to everything, the what is it, like Deus Ex Machina or whatever. Yeah. In human form. So yeah, Simone, big question now. We've gone pretty much, we've done everything but this now. We've skirted around it, but I guess this was kind of the highlight of the episode. What did you think of the long exchange in the forest between Reinhold and Mitzi? What's going on there? Like, what did you get out of it? What can you take away from it?
I like the tactic. That's the only thing that I consider for this one to work, for this episode to work. That's the only favorable. The whole scene, where the particular dialogue took place. It's good. It's good. But I don't know. It's just annoying. The drama is annoying.
Yeah.
It is really too much for me. I mean, just like you said that when it comes to Meg and Fran's relationship, about the whole thing, Franz losing his arm, it could be addressed in few good dialogues. If the writers are gonna do some good work, it will be just okay in just a few words, and everything will be explained. And in this one, it take too long in a way that it's annoying or too much. It could be good. I can see that there are some hopes in this, but they just did it too much.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's like I said earlier. It's like the kind of thing that you would see in a melodramatic opera, like again Tosca, or an ancient Japanese comedy of manners, or like a court drama or something like that. And I would say, theater is oftentimes used as a medium through which to view human interaction. So plays and musicals and that sort of thing. And I feel like this scene draws inspiration from that thesis. That notion of film is more to tell a story, whereas theater is more to kind of just watch human interactions play out, right? Like people just talking to each other, because that's what it's very dialogue heavy. I mean, it has to be, right? So that's really what theater is. It's dialogue. It's different ways, styles of talking, sort of bouncing against each other, colliding, different personalities clashing, and what comes of that. Um, and and while I feel like the scene does kind of try to do that same thing from that intent, I think it fails. I think it interprets and executes it rather poorly. And it's hard to say that anyone could learn anything about the various ways in which people interact and connect with one another from sitting through this particular scene. Everything is far too exaggerated for that. It's exaggerated beyond the point of believability. And what little you can extract is tainted by the overblown, I would say, surreality of the framework in which it is all set. It's like trying to solve a math equation that will yield a wrong answer before you've even begun, before you've even started. False premises and all that. Like the question, you're taking a math test and the question itself is written wrong, so you can't even figure it out properly. This scene in the woods is just one long false premise to me. Nothing more, but probably a lot less. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, were the foundation of this particular and that particular scene. If the foundation is not good, then I think the whole thing will collapse. And that is exactly what happened in this scene.
Yeah. Pillars of sand and all that. So now, Simone, and this is another pretty important question. We're getting close to the end of our discussion here. Do you think Mitzi is dead or just unconscious? I don't know if there's any ambiguity here, but I'm just curious. It might have been a little confusing. So I don't know. What do you think? I wonder if you have like a weird interpretation of it. Do you think she's alive, or is she gone now? Is she out of the picture?
That's the clip. I mean, first before I answer it, I think both ways, whether Mitzi is alive or dead or alive, it will impact the whole series. But it will leave a very great impact on the series, or how will the episode will wrap up, or what particular series of events will take place. Much more heavy drama and intense, I guess.
Yeah.
But if I were, in my perspective, I think Mitzi is dead, because it's Reinhold choked her for a very long time, quite some time, for maybe 30 minutes or so, and she's struggling with it. Maybe that in that way she lost more, consume more oxygen. So
Yeah.
I don't know how they address this whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're right, though. They have crossed a line now. Like, we're never going to go back to the way things were before. The series has entered its final phase. You know, we're getting to that point where it's like you can't go back. Things have irrevocable actions have taken place. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm assuming that she's dead. You know, her eyes were open and she was sitting still for too long for her not to be. You know, but it was a very bizarre death. And it seems that the writers, again, they were banking on the notion that she was young and reckless as a character, and so damaged from her experiences as a prostitute that something like this was bound to happen eventually. You know, like that's what people tend to say. It's like, oh, she lived a life of crime. He lived a life of crime. Something like this was bound to happen eventually. He was a drug addict. Something like this was bound to happen eventually. You know, but it still isn't fully convincing to me. Someone like her, with her knowledge and like insight accumulated over all the years of experiences that she's had, she wouldn't be so naive as to fall for the very basic trap that Reinhold set out for her, that we laid out with this whole ruse and everything. You know, this whole thing was just another example of something happening simply because the narrative needed it to. You know, and it's such a shame. But you know, but I would say, if I'm being honest, I don't think I'll miss Mitzi very much. Speaking subjectively now, I don't think she ever really contributed anything to the development of Franz's character or the series overall. Nothing like substantial, nothing meaningful, nothing good. I think she overstayed her welcome by the second episode that she was in, if I'm being honest. Although I'd have to say that for this I would blame the writers again. Maybe even the writer of the original source material, the novelist Alfred Doblin, because I think as a character she had potential. But for whatever reason, it seems as if the writers only ever cared about one aspect of who she was, and they turned her into a sort of one-trick pony when she didn't need to be at all. You know, she didn't need to only be the good girlfriend or whatever. She could have played a bigger role. She could have done more. She could have contributed more. She could have been more. But for whatever reason, they never really let her progress organically the way that, you know, characters like Franz are able to. And none of the things that she saw or did or experienced ever, you know, affected her. She had no natural growth or progression in that sense, no character development. And so, you know, she really was. She was the exact same character that she was when we first met her as she was when she died, and not in a good way. That isn't a, you know, it can be a good, it's not necessarily, you know, doomed. You're not doomed from the start if you have a character who's kind of the same all throughout, but that has to be intentional. That has to be that has to be, the motivation has to be that you wanted that character to be consistent all throughout. But yeah, it's not in a good way, you know, not because she was established to be that way and the logic of her character supported such an outcome, but, you know, but rather because the writers, they actively chose to neglect shaping her up, and neglected recognizing the impacts and consequences of all the things that she, you know, was involved in. So yeah, is there anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, then pretty much, if I'm going to look at um, from the from the first time that Michi entered the scene, and also what happened to him when Mitzi entered the show where she's been added to the cast. Yet not nothing happened or not much change happened, or because it's been taking so long. Just said that it's been a couple of episodes that they've been in and not really much happening or particular uh, character development that should take place, because it's some couple of episodes where this whole series can be wrapped up, but nothing happened. Um, they could include things that could happen, much more relevant things aside the dramas, too heavy dramas that they put, but they didn't. So I'm in hopes that um much more better things will happen than last two episodes.
Yeah, yeah. And so yes, Simone. Last question for the evening. If Mitzi is dead after all, then what consequences will her death have within the framework of the last two episodes of the series? Perfectly kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier, anyway. So yeah, let's take this to its inevitable end.
It's just like I said, this whether Michi is alive or not, the same series of events might take place. The same set of chaos that should be had brewed in the couple of episodes that mm, take place, or some setup scenes are already been settled, and it might already be included in those parts. And aside from the last few episodes about Mitch's, it would be much more about Franz. There might be some sort of internal problem or all this chaos that he had been brewing inside him, or real character might manifest, or in this is the because it seems like that he's always running with his problem and some sort of ideals that he's really been into, that
Yeah,
he's been driving in, that he don't wanna address it.
right.
Thing for him to make things better is to act, and that's the best that could happen in the episode, or that would really the tables were turned in this series. Not sure if that will happen.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Well, Franz probably isn't going to take it very well now, is he? However, I think the death may ultimately prove to be good for him in the long run, in the long term, because it might be it may be the very thing that finally pulls himself out of his stagnant, I guess, piss-soaked life that he's been living for so long now, and enable him to put, I guess, his homicidal and violent tendencies to good, or at least relatively better use than he has been prior to now. The series may end with him killing Reinhold and crippling the criminal syndicate somehow, thereby making his immediate environment a little better than it was when he first found it. And maybe he'll get the hell out of Dodge and go somewhere better suited for him, where he can have the chance to be happy and not be doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past, to serve as this prisoner in a never-ending cycle of personal chaos the way that he has been since episode 1. Yeah, I think Mitzi's death will actually, I think it may very well prove to be the catalyst for his last major character shift, no matter what he does, right? And that, I think, in and of itself will be interesting to see play out. Not all hope is lost for the series, just a little bit of it, just a fair bit of it. But I think there's still a silver lining here, Anything you'd like to add to that, Simone?
Yeah, I think that I don't know. This whole series had been really unpredictable, and I'm in hopes that this prediction might be true. It is the closest to the truth, or it might probably the only prediction that that might happen.
Yeah. And with that, we have now reached the end of our discussion for episode 35 of Imperial Tides podcast. I don't know, how do you think it went, Simone? Was it good? We've been gone for a little bit, not too long. We took a bit of a break, but I don't think we were overly shaky or anything. We weren't that rusty or anything coming back. I think we did pretty good. I think this was much smoother episode than I thought it would be, considering that the source material we had to work with. But I don't know. What's your take?
Mm. I think it's the same on how we handle the usual episodes. I mean, even though there's not much to talk about in each episode because how the writers work on this, on how the writers are working on the previous episodes now, uh, kind of make us bounded, but we're not really bounded at all because it seems like we are able to address what we really need to address, which is the technical aspect and how it is really connected to the source material itself,
Yeah.
I guess.
I might honestly die of overstimulation if once we finish Berlin Alexanderplatz and move on to some things that are actually good. I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle it properly. Like when we actually watch a good movie or a good show or something that like has a lot to like get into. I'm really curious to see how that's going to go. But yeah. Yeah, I think all things considered, we did a pretty good job. It was standard fare, but so was the episode. So, with that being said, guys, that's the end of episode 35 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, please do consider liking, sharing, subscribing, commenting, engaging with us in whatever multitude of ways that you you can do so. And yeah, stay tuned for more. We'll be finishing the last 2 episodes of Berlin Alexanderplatz very soon. And yeah, more to come after that. A nice range of content following that. I've got at least like 13 episodes lined up following the conclusion of this particular series. So yeah, with that being said, stay tuned and bye for now. Peace.